Hello everyone. A few days ago I penned an irritated tweet. I've essentially been banned from Twitter as a consequence. But the suspension will not be lifted unless I delete the hateful tweet in question, and I would rather die than do that.
After several requests, I guess it would be wrong for me to ignore Metal Sonic. He's one of the few antagonists in the Sonic franchise alongside Eggman that is featured quite frequently. So in this video we're gonna jump into his origins. So as many of you already know, Metal Sonic debuted as a new villain in Sonic the Hedgehog CD for the Sega CD in 1993. We see him pull up on Sonic at the beginning of Collision Chaos, kidnapping Amy Rose to kickstart the purpose of Sonic's adventure on Little Planet. It's implied that he was initially created sometime between the first Sonic the Hedgehog game and Sonic CD. And after the full announcement of Sonic Origins, it looks like Sonic CD is confirmed to take place between Sonic 1 and 2. I'll dive more into that once the game is out. Also, I always wondered why Metal Sonic's first order of business was to kidnap a girl that Sonic had no connection to. Why not just fight him here? Wouldn't it be cool if they scrapped here and then out of an act of desperation, Metal Sonic grabs Amy and dips? It's a good remake idea if there ever is one. So let's take a sec to talk about Metal Sonic's conception. It's deeply rooted in the creation of Sonic CD. For those that don't know, Sega was kinda all over the place after the success of the first Sonic the Hedgehog. Being dissatisfied with Sega of Japan's corporate policies, the creators ended up splitting up into two teams, one that went off to the US, led by Yuji Naka, who would go on to create Sonic 2, and the other who stayed in Japan, where the original designer of Sonic, Naoto Oshima, continued overseeing his own production staff to work on what would become Sonic CD. Kazuyuki Hoshino was the designer tasked on creating two original characters for the game, who would turn out to be Amy Rose and Metal Sonic, a mechanical version of Sonic that was advertised as quite the adversary. Hoshino was given the keyword menacing to build out his design, which manifests in the sleek, pointy exterior of Metal Sonic, along with his red eyes. The last major part of his appearance is the huge jet engine in his chest. It really gives that sense of power and speed. I still find that to be pretty cool. Based on character descriptions Sega has put out over the years, Metal Sonic is Eggman's most powerful weapon against Sonic, able to keep up with him in speed, power, and defense. He has impenetrable force fields, sharp claws, a plasma laser that can be fired out of his chest, and even by overloading his circuits, Metal Sonic has the ability to quadruple his speeds for a limited time. This little robot is ridiculous, and definitely hasn't been utilized in the right way since Sonic Heroes. But I digress. Funny enough, even his specifications were published in the Japanese manual for Sonic CD. Like take for instance, Metal Sonic's CPU is the LIPS AI Eggman custom chip, which has a conversation system capable of high mathematical logic enactment, which allows Metal to react to situations quickly. So Apple, I'd love to see this chip in your next iPhone.
Cover your damn mouth when you cough. I'm not trying to catch that Rona.
Anyway, Metal Sonic doesn't encounter our hero again until the famous Stardust Speedway level, where they compete against each other in an epic race, as one of Eggman's lasers decimates the level behind them. Metal Sonic is ultimately defeated when Sonic wins the race and is destroyed by Eggman's own trap, but he'd become such a fan favorite and would return as an antagonist in several future Sonic games. He would even become the main villain of Sonic Heroes in 2003, sporting a new form known as Neo Metal Sonic. This is completely off the cuff while I was editing, but I have to take a second to appreciate the song that plays in Stardust Speedway Bad Future. You'd be amazed how much actually went into this track. For example, look at the original samples of these vocals. I won't play the whole video here, so check out I Teach Vader's video on this, it's pretty incredible. Outside of that, this song pretty much is synonymous with Metal Sonic to me, and it's been remixed for Sonic Generations, Sonic Mania, and it continues to be one of my favorite songs in the entire Sonic franchise. Okay, back to the video. Metal Sonic isn't the only Sonic copy Eggman has made in the past, so I'll use this video to address the others as well. But before I continue, if you're enjoying this video, please homing attack the like button and consider subscribing. Cheers to the grind to 100,000 subscribers, you were here first. Hey. Okay, so aside from Metal Sonic, there was another model of a metallic Sonic that debuted in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. At the very end of the game, Sonic chases Eggman into space on the Death Egg, where he has no choice but to unleash a silver metallic version of Sonic that was given the name Mecha Sonic. And I'm also pretty certain that this version of Mecha Sonic was a direct homage to Mechagodzilla. Not really sure if there's any proof to this theory, but I can see some similarities in their designs. By the way, it's unclear whether the developers in the US and Japan both ended up designing a robot Sonic out of coincidence or inspiration from one another. If anyone knows the story behind that, leave a comment below. The finalized design of Mecha Sonic would be created by Yasushi Yamaguchi, who was the one to design both Tails and helped with Sonic's final design for the first game. This version of Mecha Sonic has also been called Silver Sonic amongst the fandom, and has had 2 recent appearances in Mario and Sonic Olympics 2020 and the LEGO Dimensions game, so maybe this version isn't totally forgotten. Strangely enough, the name Mecha Sonic would also be used for a different version of the robot included in the Master System version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Fun fact, this would be the very first Sonic copy we'd see in the franchise. You may recognize him in the Metal Sonic boss battle in Sonic Mania. The last version of Mecha Sonic would appear in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which possesses the same name. I believe this version is what most fans think of when they hear Mecha Sonic. It's heavily implied that this version is the upgraded form of the Mecha Sonic in Sonic 2, with the Sonic Encyclopedia confirming this by referring to the model as Mecha Sonic Mark II. I'm on board with this, as the version that was originally in the Death Egg looks more like a prototype Dr. Eggman was working on, and just happened to unleash it on Sonic in a desperate attempt to stop him. I've always associated this version with the main antagonist from the Super Mario Bros. Z series by Alvin Earthworm. Surprisingly, that's the most menacing version of this character, and I think you should all check out that series if you haven't already. You'd think with all these Sonic robots laying around, Eggman would have tried to make robot versions of the other characters.
You stupid!
Oh, he did? Yeah, so there's 2 other popular creations based on Sonic's friends, the first being Tails' doll, which I won't cover in this video. That's a whole nother rabbit hole that we'll get to for Halloween or something. The other one we've only seen in one Sonic game, and that's Metal Knuckles. Metal Knuckles only appears in Sonic R, a racing game for the Sega Saturn, with one of the most banging soundtracks my ears has had the pleasure of listening to. The plot for Sonic R has Dr. Eggman luring Sonic and Tails into a World Grand Prix, so they can find the Chaos Emeralds that are hidden on the tracks, so that he can steal them later. Dr. Eggman creates Metal Knuckles as a secret weapon to fight toe-to-toe with Knuckles in the case that he becomes a problem for his plans as well. There's really not much more to our poor friend Metal Knuckles here, and honestly, it would be cool if him and Metal Sonic team up as bosses in a future Sonic game. Just an idea. There's one last Sonic copy I wanted to bring up from the games that's only featured in Sonic Adventure. If you travel to Eggman's base in the Mystic Ruins, you'll actually see 2 Sonic robots floating in tubes. The first is Metal Sonic, and the other I thought was supposed to be Mecha Sonic, but if you get a closer look at the model, it isn't exactly the same as the Mecha Sonics we've seen previously. Ian Flynn, the lead writer of some of the Archie comics and IDW comics, refers to this particular robot as Mecha Sonic version 3. It would later be an inspiration for a robot referred to as Silver Sonic 2.0 in the Archie comics. Would be great if we saw this thing come to life in a future game as well. Outside of the games, Metal Sonic would be featured as Sonic's rival in the 1996 animation Sonic the Hedgehog OVA. This takes place in a completely separate continuity, and I recommend you check out my review of this movie from a couple years back. Never mind, it got blocked by YouTube. RIP. We actually see Robotnik putting the finishing touches on the robot he calls Hyper Metal Sonic, his greatest creation. And like in the games, he's created to keep up with and destroy Sonic. For him to reach his full potential, Metal needs to infuse his AI with Sonic's life data, and the first half of the movie is Eggman setting up a trap to get Sonic into his lab so he could download his life data into Metal. But you might also know about this movie because of that iconic scene that's more or less become a meme over the years. But I'd definitely say it's worth a watch, as it's only an hour in length. Surprisingly, we don't really see Metal Sonic in any other animation aside from Sonic Boom.
You know Metal Sonic, right? He's been upgraded with all the video game motion capture data I recorded.
I haven't mentioned Fleetway's Sonic the Comic in a while, but Metal Sonic does make a different kind of appearance in this particular comic. His first appearance is an adaptation of Sonic the Hedgehog CD, and is actually referred to as Metalix. Metalix is designed by Robotnik's henchman Grimer, and kidnaps Amy Rose in order to trap Sonic on the Miracle Planet. The planet is actually terraformed to be Metalix's power source, making him more or less invincible as long as he's fighting on it. So how does Sonic handle this? Alright, so strap in. Sonic is given a mythical gem known as the Time Stone.
We're in the end game now.
No, not that one. By his own future self, which allows him to travel to the past and prevent the Miracle Planet from being terraformed to power Metallix, which erases him from existence. Then he gives his past self the Time Stone, creating a really questionable time loop that even confused the artist of this story. After this, more Metallix would be created by Robotnik, with even a few of them going rogue and renaming themselves the Brotherhood of Metallix. We even see versions of the Metallix that are based on Mecha Sonic Mark II and Metal Knuckles, which serves as a pretty nice cameo in my opinion. And they actually become such a nuisance that Sonic and Robotnik have to team up to deactivate them. But of course we have the Archie comic, which, you know, I'm kinda getting accustomed to. It used to scare me just getting an inch close to any of these comics, but now I'm kinda reading through this lore and nothing surprises me anymore. So Metal Sonic in the Archie comic can get a little confusing because there are multiple versions. The design that we're used to is revealed as Metal Sonic version 1.0, in a story arc that's based around Sonic CD. So just like in the games, he kidnaps Amy and has the final showdown with Sonic on Stardust Speedway, where he has to push his limits to keep up with Sonic. Unable to withstand that amount of friction, his legs melt and the race is over. I kinda like that twist. Metal contains a gem inside of him known as the Power Gem, which allows him to upgrade himself into different forms, and with each appearance, his body starts to look a little different with every version. But things shift for our boy Metal after he and Sonic begin to fight within a volcano on the verge of erupting, while Sonic attempts to save a kidnapped Tails. Sonic tries to appeal to Metal's circuits by telling him there's more to life than just being more powerful, and initially this falls on deaf ears. But seeing the unbreakable friendship between Sonic and Tails during such a chaotic moment, he decides to help them and holds back the lava while Sonic and Tails escape, and then he sinks into the lava and dies. Okay, so it's not exactly the end of Metal Sonic, because the power gem within him manages to maintain his core programming, which is recovered and given to Sonic's uncle, Sir Charles Hedgehog, who ends up rebuilding him into a robot that is given the name Shard. This transformation gives Metal a new lease on life and a chance to prove himself. And on the flip side, Dr. Eggman, the other one, go check out my Eggman origin video if you need a refresher, constructs a brand new Metal Sonic known as version 3.0, which takes the role in the rest of the comic arcs as the Metal Sonic we're familiar with. He's destroyed quite a few times and a new version is created to take his place, and eventually Shard and Metal Sonic have an extremely brutal battle as Eggman sends Metal Sonic to destroy Shard and retrieve his power gem along with the data contained within him. Unable to talk Metal Sonic out of his violent rampage, Shard uses his Power Gem core to explode, taking Metal Sonic out in the process, and severely damaging himself. Unfortunately, we'll never know the final fate of Shard, whether he's just very damaged or dead, because shortly after this, the Super Genesis wave will retcon the Archie universe, aligning things more closely with the game continuity. In this revamped universe, there is only one Metal Sonic, and he's more or less the same version of himself that we see in the games. And I know I missed a ton of info on all the other Metal and Mecha Sonics, there's so many of them, like Captain Metal for instance, who was a Metal Sonic version, who eventually forms his own robot pirate crew. So yeah, if you have some other highlights from this comic book series regarding Metal Sonic, feel free to leave a comment below. And yeah, I also know he's featured pretty heavily in the Sonic IDW comics, but since that follows the game continuity, I won't speak on that in this video either. But hey, feel free to discuss that in the comments section as well.
Alright, now Sonic's back, but with the Saturn, and it's called
Sonic X-Treme. This is the blue dude with the attitude going 3D this year.
The lie detector determined that was a lie.
You know, I'm really just trying to get to the Sonic Adventure characters, but every time I think I'm ready, there's always one more thing! Have y'all ever heard the story about Tiara Bubowski?
Who?
Okay, how about Sonic Mars?
No.
Sonic X-Treme? Okay, so let's start there then, because this Origin Oracle is about a character that is deeply tied to the failed development of a Sonic game that never released. I'm sure a lot of you may know this story, but Sonic X-Treme was a game that was developed for the Sega Saturn, Sega's CD-ROM based console that was released in Japan in November 1994, and in the West in the summer of 95. So one of these things would cost you about $399 in 95, so adjust for inflation and yeah, you're looking at around $750. Honestly, after the $600 price tag of the PS3, I wonder if video game companies will ever take a risk like that again.
$600 ain't shit to Chad Wooden.
Times be rough, son. Anyway, with Nintendo as their biggest competitor and Sony's PlayStation rapidly gaining a foothold in the market, Sega needed one hell of a system seller. And I'd argue their biggest competitor was themselves, but that's probably a story for another day. Sonic X-Treme was to be the big Sonic title that would release for the Sega Saturn, developed by the US-based Sega Technical Institute. Yeah, STI, I know. If you watch my video on Metal Sonic, this was the team that originally split off to be based in America and created Sonic the Hedgehog 2. But would you believe this team was even further divided after the release of Sonic 2? There was this tension between the Japanese and American developers that made up this team, so they decided to work on separate games after Sonic 2. With the Japanese devs, Yuji Naka included, calling up Michael Jackson to work on Sonic 3 and Knuckles, while the American team put out Sonic Spinball. One of these games is much better than the other. So after Sonic 3 and Knuckles was released, the Japanese devs had enough and left STI for good to head back to the original Sonic team in Japan. The remaining American devs of STI were focused on researching what the next Sonic game would be, coming up with experimental pitches, with some of them being based in the world of the Sonic the Hedgehog TV series that was running at the time. The first of these pitches was Sonic 16, intended to be a Sega Genesis side-scroller that moved at a slower pace with more focus on story than previous Sonic titles. A small demo even shows Sonic meeting up with Sally Acorn, and this was ultimately a scrapped concept since Sega wasn't exactly keen on Sonic moving this slow, and they were pushing for a more mainline title. This would be the first of many phases for the defunct Sonic X-Treme. In early 1994, a new Sonic pitch for 32-bit consoles was created by the STI team for a working title known as Sonic Mars, intended for release on the Sega 32X. This game was also supposed to take place in the world of the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, and it featured characters from the show like Sally Acorn and Bunny Rabbit. And finally, I get to bring up the character this video is about, Princess Tiara.
Finally!
Tiara here was a new original character that would have been featured in Sonic Mars, created by CG designer Chris Sen, popular for his previous work on Comic Zone for the Sega Genesis. He would design Tiara as a Manx cat, and I'm not seeing the resemblance here whatsoever. This would also make her the second Sonic cat character to be erased from existence.
First time?
She was intended to be this spunkier female protagonist, would be a little closer to Sonic in attitude, with her design sporting a few different looks before it was finalized. In Sonic Mars, her hair was a little longer and flowed a little more, probably intending to make her look more like royalty. The plot for Sonic Mars was intended to have Sonic discovering a message from one of Robotnik's computers, explaining that Robotnik was trying to take over a computer VR world known as Micromobius. With Sonic's friends captured and taken to Micromobius by Robotnik, he has to travel into the VR world to save his friends one by one. Funny enough, I swear I've read a few theories online as this being the plot of Sonic Frontiers. Anyway, Princess Tiara was intended to be an additional character that would have to be rescued. Once this was done, the rescued characters would become playable characters in the game. Other playable characters were Tails, Princess Sally Acorn, Bunny Rabbit, and Knuckles. Tiara herself was supposed to be the daughter of King Cyberusky, the leader of Micromobius, and would be characterized as vying for Sonic's attention, much to Sally's dismay. I honestly wondered how this was going to be portrayed on the 32X, since based on the character description, this love triangle may have been a source of conflict. This early concept would eventually be greenlit by Sega of America and would be fully taken on by the American devs at STI. It's even said Yuji Naka took a look at their ideas and simply said, "Good luck," before heading back to Japan's Sonic team to go work on Nights into Dreams. Yuji Naka is kind of a dick. Especially when it comes to the story of Sonic X-Treme. But considering this happened a long time ago, I do believe people can change, and I wish him well considering he's bouncing back from several recent failures, but more on him later. Chris Sen would eventually take over as the lead designer, and Sonic Mars would be slowly reworked into the project known as Sonic X-Treme, with focus for its release being shifted from the 32X to another unreleased prototype console Sega was working on. That console would never see the light of day, and it would be later decided the best option would be to release Sonic X-Treme for their newest console, the Sega Saturn. The spunky Tiara would be kept intact as a concept, going through slight redesigns to have a sportier, more athletic look, with her hair tied up in a ponytail. She was still supposed to stay as a playable character, with her game mode focusing on 2D platforming, while giving Tiara an ability to travel forward and back to other 2D planes. We'd actually see this implemented as a mechanic in the Metallic Madness level in Sonic Mania. Not sure if this was an intended homage by the devs, but I wouldn't be surprised. Sonic X-Treme's plot is another issue though. They had so many conceptual plot lines that Tiara's role wasn't exactly set in stone. For example, in the storyline known as Sonic Twist, Sonic has to meet up with Tiara in her kingdom for a date. On his way there, a bunch of interference from Dr. Robotnik occurs, with him having to get through enemies and obstacles while obtaining the Chaos Emeralds to present to Tiara once he's arrived at their date spot. In this version of events, Tiara is still featured as a princess, and the intention was for cutscenes of her throughout the game, expressing her frustration the longer Sonic takes to get to her. There was another one known as the Sonic Boom storyline, which would begin with Dr. Robotnik being infected with a deadly virus known as the Doom virus. He comes up with a plan to infect Sonic with the virus to force him to go find a cure, which he'd steal from him before their time was up. To lure Sonic into a trap to infect him, he kidnaps Tiara, who in this scenario is the daughter of a professor by the name of Gazebo Bubowski. With her chains laced with Doom virus, Sonic must seek the help of Professor Bubowski to find a cure and rescue Tiara. And I can't help but think that Ian Flynn took some inspiration from this plotline for the Metal Virus arc in the IDW comics, where Eggman lures Sonic into a fight with infected minions to pass a highly infectious and incurable robot zombie virus to Sonic. This plan actually works, kicking off some pretty crazy events that I won't spoil in this video, but this is definitely a great read. Another potential plotline for Sonic X-Treme was known as the Sonic Doom storyline, which would have had Robotnik cracking open the Master Emerald while trying to utilize its power. This act would release an entity called Chaos Doom that lay trapped in silence within the Master Emerald for thousands of years. Now free, Chaos Doom spreads the Doom virus throughout the atmosphere,
Ensuring complete global saturation,
causing the world to slowly wither away and take control of robots and creatures alike. In this version of events, Tiara would also be the daughter of Professor Bubowski, kidnapped after Robotnik fails to get the cure for the virus from the professor. Sonic is infected while he saves her from captivity and goes on an adventure to assemble the cure with the professor's help. So aside from this story being very similar to the last one, some of these concepts must have remained intact for Sonic Adventure, which would be made by Sonic Team after this game failed to get off the ground. The idea of an enemy being trapped within the Master Emerald filled with loneliness and anger for hundreds of years sounds way too similar to the plot of Sonic Adventure. Also, the name Chaos Doom is kinda on the nose, but surprisingly, I have no evidence to prove this. But you would think Sonic Team building Sonic Adventure from the very burnt up ashes of this project, something must have come from these 3 years of development time. The most well-known storyline for Sonic X-Treme was published in an article known as the Red Shoe Diaries, which was 3 pages published in the June 1996 issue of the Game Players magazine, documenting the development cycles for Sonic X-Treme. And even all the potential titles for this game were revealed in there, like Sonic Ring World, Sonic Blast, Sonic Boom, and Bubonic Sonic.
What?
The plotline published in this article explains that Sonic runs over to the home of Professor Bubowski after receiving a distress signal. Tiara and the professor are guardians of the Rings of Order and are adept at a lost ancient art of ringsmithing. At some point in this story, Dr. Robotnik sets out to claim these Rings of Order for himself. Chris Sen would later reveal that this was just a random artifact that was thrown together at the last minute for the feature in the magazine, and those versions of events were never really fully fleshed out. And at this stage of the video, I feel like this is like way more of a Sonic X-Treme video than a Tiara video, but based on everything I've revealed thus far, you can imagine that this whole project was a mess. The competition was closing in on Sega, there was a ton of internal turmoil between their American offices and Japanese offices, the developers attempting to work with 2 different engines for one game, even more rivalry from Sonic Team of Japan, especially Yuji Naka, who didn't want the Sonic X-Treme team touching his precious Nights into Dreams engine.
Keep my Nights game out your f***ing mouth!
Even going as far to threaten to quit if Sega let them use that engine to speed up game development on Sonic X-Treme. And if that wasn't enough, the developers on the Sonic X-Treme project were given such harsh deadlines to compete with Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot that they had to sleep in the studio at nights and worked 15 to 20 hours per day, driving themselves to illness. Meanwhile, Sega was prepared to go all out on merchandising for this game, releasing a radio and cassette player with Sonic X-Treme branding, ice cream bars with Sonic X-Treme on the package, and damn you Sega for having me question what this was as a kid for countless years. Funny enough, they were even in talks for a film that would be tied into Sonic X-Treme. signing a deal with MGM in August 1994 to make a live-action animated film. And this idea would be thrown around for years and years and years until we got the final product in 2020. And the story behind that is another fascinating one I'll save for another video. So while this is all happening, what the hell happened to Tiara Bubowski?
Oh shit!
Well, the longer that development went on, the more irrelevant she became in the grand scheme of things. The scale of the game continued to grow. There was going to be cameos from Fang the Sniper, Metal Sonic. At one point of development, they were even thinking of replacing Tiara as a playable character with Amy Rose instead, who I believe got most of her intended personality traits in Sonic Adventure in the long run. But aside from that, our poor Tiara wouldn't even debut in a game, so I can't even say she qualifies for the vault. Oh, and did you know she was originally supposed to be a Bandicoot? I put that line there because I had no idea where else it would go when I wrote the script.
But I know if I didn't mention the Bandicoot thing, someone would come after me in the comments section, so...
So as for the rest of the Sonic X-Treme project, it failed the moment Chris Sen fell sick and was unable to meet the holiday deadline to compete with Mario 64. Christina Coffin, another crucial designer on the project, also fell sick with pneumonia and was unable to continue working, which led Sega to indefinitely delay the project until it was finally cancelled by Sega of Japan. Chris Sen and Ofer Alan would continue to work on the Sonic X-Treme engine, hoping to release the game on PC through Sega's PC division, but this would also be turned down. The final assets of Sonic X-Treme were sent to die in the game Sonic Schoolhouse. A mere skeleton of their true selves. And that, my adults, is the tragic story of Tiara Bubowski. Or maybe I just used her as an excuse to talk about Sonic X-Treme. Regardless, she's a cult favorite, with our boy Ian Flynn subtly throwing her into obscure Archie comic panels. He was even interested in bringing Tiara and Professor Bubowski back as official characters in the Archie comics, but after they stopped publishing the comics, Flynn has stated that he'd never feature them due to legal reasons that can't be disclosed. So is there more to this rabbit hole of a story, or will this just fade into a lifelong mystery like Michael Jackson's involvement with Sega back in the day? If something interesting happens in the future, you'll probably hear it here last. As for our boy Chris Sen, he and the other devs that worked on Sonic X-Treme later went on to open up a site called Sonic X-Treme Compendium, which aired out all of this dirty laundry, and without that info, I wouldn't have been able to make this video. They even provided assets to the original engine that was built for the PC, along with textures and other data that allowed fans to piece together workable demos and fan projects for Sonic X-Treme. So if you look hard enough, you can try out some of these demos for yourself. But with that said, in the next Origin Oracle, we'll be finally moving on to the phoenix of this story, Sonic Adventure, which rose from the ashes of Sonic X-Treme to debut on the Sega Dreamcast.
If it isn't Sonic!
Look, it's a giant talking egg!
Alright, finally we're at Sonic Adventure characters, and I told you all last time to guess who it would be. So this Origin Oracle is about
Gamma.
Just kidding, whoever guessed him was completely wrong. We're diving into the tragic backstory of Chaos, and on the other side of that coin, we have Tikal. The entire climax of Sonic Adventure is shaped around these two characters and their struggles that took place thousands of years prior. And before I continue, this series will be covering a few more Sonic characters like Rouge the Bat,
Oh shit!
Shadow the Hedgehog, and Cream the Rabbit, before I give the Sonic franchise a little bit of a break. I wanted to continue down the Mario rabbit hole and other franchises like Donkey Kong and Zelda, and while I know many of you are Sonic fans, I would be eternally grateful for your support for other characters, as I know I'm taking a little bit of a risk stepping out of my Sonic comfort zone. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting this series up to this point. I'm extremely pleased and grateful with the results. Anyway, on to the video. So Sonic Adventure is one of my favorite Sonic games of all time, released for the Sega Dreamcast in 1998 in Japan and 99 in the West. It took a different approach to previous Sonic games, with Sonic making a full transition to the 3D plane, while also focusing on story and exploration, and blending in action stages that felt natural to the Sonic series up to that point. The goal was to include elements from RPGs, complete with explorable hub worlds populated with NPCs, that live their normal daily lives while Sonic and friends are dealing with a much larger threat. And seriously, if you haven't followed the NPC dialogue, some of it is actually more interesting than some of the character plotlines. My mom wandered— oh no, your mom has a gambling issue! So the game opens up with Sonic taking a vacation in the city of Station Square. Lively town complete with deadbeat parents, stalkers, a lovely resort, and a casino that throws you in the garbage if you don't win enough. Sonic's vacation is cut short when Dr. Eggman returns with his new method of world domination, Chaos, an apparent god of destruction who grows stronger by absorbing the power of the Chaos Emeralds. And as you play through the story, you learn more about where this beast came from, and the extent of his power. So to fully understand Chaos's origins, we have to go back over 3,000 years before the events of Sonic Adventure. Knuckles' ancestors have a fully fleshed out civilization, known as the Knuckles Tribe, very creative Sega. It's heavily implied that they are peaceful people who are well versed on the Master Emerald, Chaos Emeralds, and the Guardian that protects it. Tikal is more or less the princess of this tribe, with her grandmother initially serving as the clan's chief before her passing, which gave leadership to Pachacamac, Tikal's father. And Chief Pac-Man here is a much less peaceful individual, hungry for both power and wars of conquest, so he turns the Knuckles tribe into a set of bloodthirsty warriors. And as you can imagine, the chief sets his eyes on the Chaos Emeralds and Master Emerald's power to help them wage wars against neighboring tribes. Tikal, on the other hand, wishes to preserve that sacred shrine that's home to the Emeralds and mysterious peaceful creatures known as Chao, protected by the spirit of water who would eventually become Chaos. Tikal befriends both the Chao and Chaos, vowing to do whatever she can to protect this sacred place. And it's heavily implied that Tikal spends a lot of time at the Master Emerald's altar, gaining the trust of its inhabitants while she continues to plead with her father to call off this planned hostile takeover. Being the complete boomer that he is though, Pachacamac ignores all this and leads a group of warriors to burn everything down and take the emeralds by force, seemingly killing some of the Chao in the process. This, rightfully so, completely pisses off Chaos, and in his anger he absorbs all 7 Chaos Emeralds to become this powerful monster that decimates the Knuckles tribe, to the point where only Knuckles is left as the sole survivor 3,000 years later. In a desperate attempt to stop the destruction, Tikal sacrifices herself to seal both Chaos and her spirit within the Master Emerald, saving countless lives in this one selfless act. And then Eggman comes along to fuck this all up for everyone.
I didn't see that coming!
But more on that in a second. The surviving echidnas fear the wrath of this beast for generations, leaving behind tablets and murals to avoid a future catastrophe, which may be why this tribe becomes so obsessed about guarding the Master Emerald from that point on. Now before we move on to future events, I want to cover the conceptions behind both Chaos and Tikal. We'd actually learned from sources outside the game like Sonic Channel and the Sonic Adventure Navigation Guide that Chaos used to be a Chao himself. Years of exposure to the Master Emerald mutated him into the form that we're familiar with, and he begins serving as the protector of the shrine itself and the other Chao that live there. Chao are still somewhat of a mystery in the overall Sonic lore, but these ancient creatures eventually live peacefully among humans, with the adventure games fleshing out an entire pet system for these things that honestly was so masterfully crafted to the point where Sonic Team doesn't want to even tread that ground again. So fingers crossed for Frontiers. But my personal theory is that they came from outer space thousands of years ago, somehow brought to Earth alongside the Chaos Emeralds and Master Emerald, origins that still haven't been covered in a Sonic game. But the closest evidence I have to back this up is their alien-like appearance and the constant references to Chao in space in the Adventure series. But continuity is not the greatest in this series, and I'm probably reaching. Anyway, Sonic Team wanted to bring in a new enemy for Sonic Adventure that would be separate from Eggman. And the reason he's a watery life form is because Sega wanted to flex with the Dreamcast's new technology, and challenge themselves with an enemy that couldn't be implemented before. Takashi Iizuka—
I was wondering about the reason why they actually changed the music. Like, was it because of Michael Jackson?
Oh shit.
Michael Jackson.
Yes.
who would eventually become current head of Sonic Team, played a major role in the concept of Chaos at the time, getting a resounding yes from team lead Yuji Naka, who approved it on the spot. And this would lead to some really creative boss battles. Except this one.
Ah! He transformed again!
Man, no one ever cuts us any slack.
Ugh. It's not even that bad, you just have to do this one 3 times in Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles' story. They should have at least have Tails fight Eggman in the meantime, or something like that. Anyway, Tikal on the other hand would be created as part of Sonic Team's attempt to shed some light on Knuckles' ancestors, taking a huge influence from both Mayan and Incan culture to flesh out this civilization. They took trips to Central and South America for research, visiting the ruins of ancient cities such as Tikal, Machu Picchu, and Tulum to draw inspiration in what would become the Mystic Ruins. Tikal's name would be derived from the ancient Mayan city in current-day Guatemala of the same name, which translates to places of voices. Her father's name, Pachacamac, was shared with a city belonging to the Inca Empire. We would also see a lot of these cultural influences in the architecture of the level Lost World, which takes place inside the pyramid located in the Mystic Ruins, and I really like this touch. It gives the ancient Echidna tribe that sense of mystery and wonder, just like the Mayans and similar tribes that used to walk the Americas, and the rich culture we see left behind in the ruins to this day. So fast forward 3,000 years into the future, Eggman stumbles upon the tablets that the Knuckles tribe left behind, warning everyone of chaos sealed inside the Master Emerald, and just like a child in front of a big red do not push button, he decides to crack the Master Emerald open and release this ancient god, while Knuckles is just sitting there, knuckling.
Shut up!
I mean, Knuckles, this was your one job.
Shut up!
And you know, I was always so distracted by chaos being released in this cutscene, I never noticed the spirit of Tikal floating off screen.
You stupid!
With that said, Tikal's spirit is actually your hint marker throughout the game, guiding the characters on the right path to the next key item or cutscene. You can't stop chaos if you don't progress the story, right?
You gotta progress! Progress the story!
Yeah, all them. Why today? All them numbers, yeah.
But seriously, having a legit story reason for hints presented like this is also a really nice touch. So Sonic and his friends go on their own unique adventures, mostly caused by either Eggman or Chaos, and once Eggman is defeated and the dust settles, an even more pissed off Chaos manages to track down all the emeralds and lays waste to Station Square in one of the greatest cutscenes in the Sonic series. This moment right here was iconic. Even as a kid, I knew Supersonic would be the one to put Chaos down, but this still managed to convey a deep sense of hopelessness. The damage was already done, lives already lost. The city you spend the entire game exploring, destroyed in an instant. The only thing to do now is to make sure he doesn't become a global threat. And in this moment, the guiding light we've seen the whole game reveals herself as Tikal to Sonic. I don't know about anyone else, but this blew my mind as a kid. It's pretty damn obvious, but for some reason I didn't think my hint marker was the girl we were seeing in the visions of the past this whole time. She pleads with Sonic that they have to find some way to seal Chaos back into the Master Emerald, and in both a really cool and heartwarming character moment, Sonic refuses and asks the real question, what good would that do? He understands Chaos's anger and even sounds empathetic to his pain in that moment, saying that if they sealed him away again, he'd just be even angrier. So with that, Sonic's friends brings the Chaos Emeralds to him, and he uses the power of positive emotions to transform into Supersonic and neutralize Chaos's negativity. This is so cool. So after their fight, Chaos calms down a little bit, and in that moment of clarity, Tikal shows him the descendants of the Chao he used to watch over, explaining that they're in good hands in the present day, being cared for by the people he attempted to destroy. Life goes on, and the time for fighting is over. Tikal then force chokes Chaos and disappears into the sky.
You have failed me, Inquisitor. Surrender.
Okay, I'm just kidding, but I think this implies that they finally pass on to the other side. And I'll give Sonic Team this, for a completely silent antagonist that doesn't have a single line of dialogue in this game, I totally get Chaos. His original model doesn't really change, but his first appearance in the game where he's staring down the police and about to fight Sonic, versus the ending where he's gazing toward the Chao's Station Square, have two completely different connotations, and somehow they were able to convey these emotions with an enemy that doesn't physically express emotions, so bravo. And as for the fate of Tikal and Chaos, it's heavily implied that they're both dead. At least, I think that was the original intention. In an old 2004 Q&A with Sonic that was hosted on Sega's site, a fan asked if Ray, Bean, Chaos, Knack, Tikal, and Bark would ever reappear, and Sonic dodged this question expertly, saying, "Actually, I don't know exactly where they are.
Never met this person, these people. I don't know who they are. I don't know who these people are."
So it sounds like Sega did not want to address that at all in that moment, but Chaos made one more appearance as a training partner in the 2004 GBA game Sonic Battle, toward the end of the game where Knuckles just comments on him standing there menacingly. In my opinion, I'm all for letting these two rest, but continuing to have them as non-canon appearances in future games would be pretty cool too. So before I move on to the comics, this story is indeed told in Sonic X as well. The anime adapted the story of Sonic Adventure while blending in several other original characters from the anime itself. There isn't much to say about this, as the story of Tikal and Chaos are more or less identical to the games, but I just want to acknowledge their appearance here. Tikal and Chaos have made appearances in two publications we should all be familiar with: Sonic the Comic, published by Fleetway, and the Archie comics, which I've slowly grown to love. In the Fleetway comics, Tikal and Pachacamac are still part of the Echidna tribe, but this time we have a name for their enemies: the Draken Empire. The Draken are an alien race who in this comic managed to create the 7 Chaos Emeralds by taking over the emerald mines of the Echidnas, and by funneling their own energy source called Chaos Energy into them. During their ongoing war with the Draken, Pachacamac, and yeah, it's spelled a little bit different here in this comic for some reason. Anyway, Pac-Man steals the Chaos Emeralds from them, while Tikal will use them to bring Sonic from the future into her time period to help their tribe. And Sonic has the opportunity to meet Pachacamac, but not long after the Draken overrun their city. And during this battle, an energy beam clashes with the Chaos Emeralds, causing a Draken soldier who was imprisoned in a water-filled tank to be doused in Chaos Energy, therefore transforming him into Chaos. Kinda reminds me of the origins of Dr. Eggman in this sense, where like there was a rotten egg and Chaos Energy involved and this whole corruption. Not sure if that was meant to be a callback, but I'm getting similar vibes from this one. But for Chaos, this would be a completely different backstory here, and to protect Sonic from being killed by Chaos during this battle, Tikal and Pac-Man will send him back to the future where Robotnik has rediscovered Chaos. And much like the games, Robotnik doesn't have control of him very long, with Chaos hunting down all the Chaos Emeralds and transforming into perfect Chaos. Super Sonic, a completely different entity from Sonic in this continuity, arrives at the scene and drains Chaos of all his Chaos energy to recharge himself. And this reverts Chaos to his original Draken fish form, who is quickly discarded by Super Sonic. So with perfect Chaos defeated and this crazed Super Sonic on the loose, Sonic uses that opportunity to become a single being with him again. And if you're interested in learning more about this nightmare fuel, go ahead and check out my What is Super Sonic video for a quick explanation. So surprisingly, the Archie version of these backstories are a little more tame. Normally they tend to push the boundaries on plot lines here and there, but most of the story beats from Sonic Adventure remain intact. Tikal is still from hundreds of years in the past, from a particular warrior tribe of Echidnas from an island country known as Albion. And this tribe would later be called the Knuckles Clan and would wander the world of Mobius to further colonize, until they reach a continent of Somerica, where they eventually settle in Pai Misterioso. And if that name sounds familiar to you, yes, this is the city where Big the Cat's tribe is from, the Felidae. I've done an origin oracle on him too, and I learned a lot of things that I did not know about Big. But hundreds of years before present, the Knuckles Clan and the Felidae began to war over this territory, which also involved a separate Echidna clan that were well versed in the sciences, the Nocturnus clan. And it would be a free-for-all over this territory among these three tribes, pushing Tikal to grow up in a rather unstable time. And while exploring the mystic ruins with Pachacamac, they would stumble upon a Chao Garden as well as the 7 Chaos Emeralds and another mystical gem known as the Ancient Onyx. Just like in Sonic Adventure, Tikal would earn the trust of the Chao and the Guardian Chaos who protected them. But this war just continued to rage, and a desperate Pachacamac brought his warriors for a hostile takeover of the garden to utilize the Chaos Emeralds against the Felidae and Nocturnus clan. This aggressive maneuver enranges Chaos and pushes him to utilize the Chaos Emeralds to wipe out the Knuckles clan. And instead of the Master Emerald in this story arc, Tikal, along with 7 special Chow known as the 7 servers, would seal chaos into the ancient Onyx, with Tikal spending the next few centuries keeping his anger in check. The other major difference here is that after she performs this act, the servers would transform into the Super Emeralds, and would scatter across Mobius. So fast forward to the future, and the events of Sonic Adventure occur in the present similarly to the games, with Perfect Chaos destroying Station Square. This time, Tikal would use an ancient ritual to weaken Chaos and draw the Super Emeralds from within him to give to Sonic to transform into Super Sonic and finish the job. With Chaos's anger quelled, the 7 Super Emeralds transform back into their original Chow forms, and Tikal would return to the ancient Onyx to rest alongside Chaos. This time, in peace.
Stop the cap!
Until Eggman reawakens Chaos again and merges him with Dr. Wily's Devil Core machine to create the Chaos Devil, which Sonic and Mega Man have to team up to take down to stop Eggman and Wily from rewriting their realities. Oh yeah, did I mention that Sonic and Mega Man had a crossover series in the Archie comic which led up to the whole moment where the entire story was retconned? Cool. And at the end of all of this, a Super Genesis wave occurs, which rewrites Sonic's universe into a reality that fits closer to the games, and this literal world-shattering event causes Tikal and Chaos to be released from the Master Emerald. Yeah, they're sealed in the Master Emerald in this reality. I hope I'm not confusing you guys. And while they don't play major roles in this arc after that, they both assist Sonic and the Freedom Fighters to return the shattered world to its restored state. And this would be the last arc we'd see in the Archie comics before its cancellation. So despite everything we've covered in this video, a lot of it's pretty similar, which I'm kind of thankful for. I think that the story of Tikal and Chaos was told perfectly the first time around, and to see even the Archie comics stick to the script on this, I'd say the writers agree with me on this.
This is the wrong room.
Here's a Sonic character that nobody hates. E-102 Gamma, the robot built by Dr. Eggman, who managed to reclaim his free will and would go on a robot murdering spree to liberate his brothers.
What?
Welcome to Origin Oracle, my adults, the segment where I take a deep dive into the origins of your favorite characters. So, to finish off Sonic Adventure, let's talk about one of the more sympathetic characters in the series, E-102, codename Gamma. E-102 Gamma first appeared in Sonic Adventure as a playable character, and for the very first time in the series would be able to play as one of Dr. Eggman's robots. His story begins with a first-person shot of Dr. Eggman leering over him. Yo, take a couple of steps back, Eggman. Thank you. So much like other robots in the series, there's a flicky within Gamma being used to power him. And I'll talk more about the flickies in a bit, but for now just know it's a pink bird that was kidnapped that would be used to create Gamma. After Eggman welcomes Gamma to the world, he sends him into the shooting range where we'll get a gist of his gameplay. And seeing as they were trying to diversify the Sonic Adventure roster with several different gameplay styles, Gamma appeared as an action shooter stage. Equipped with a laser gun with homing capabilities, you traverse a timed stage, shooting as many targets as possible, which would give you small time bonuses, and I will admit, it's quite satisfying. This style of gameplay would be carried over to Sonic Adventure 2 for the Tails and Eggman stages, with a few tweaks here and there. Let me know in the comments which one you guys prefer. So Gamma here gets to shoot plushies of Knuckles and Tails, and finishes off the level by destroying a Sonic doll. With these dangerous hostiles neutralized, Eggman starts to believe that Gamma is ready to serve aboard his flying fortress, the Egg Carrier. But before being promoted to his new crew, he has to take on his older brother Beta, and with a name like that, we all know who comes out victorious. After his crushing defeat, Beta pleads like a beta with Eggman to join them on the ship, and with his big heart, Eggman obliges by sending him on board to be used for spare parts. After being welcomed aboard with the most pathetic fanfare scene, Eggman sends Gamma and his 3 younger brothers Delta, Epsilon, and Zeta to hunt down a frog that swallowed a Chaos Emerald and Chaos's tail, who at this point is working with Eggman to destroy Station Square. If you all watched my Big the Cat Origin Oracle, you'd know he's referring to Froggy, the one being held against his will by Big. Froggy, don't blink if you need to be rescued.
Why are you running?
I'm just kidding, they're supposed to be best friends. But after Gamma has retrieved Froggy, Eggman gives him great praise and disposes of the rest of the E100 series, beaming them out to various locations. With Gamma properly proving himself, his next orders are to retrieve a bird that was captured alongside Amy, and on his way to their jail cell, poor Gamma here steps into the wrong room, only to see Beta being ripped apart and remodeled, and you can truly perceive his genuine shock from this scene here.
Beta.
Already it seems like our robot friend is growing a conscience, and this is pushed further when he goes to retrieve the bird from Amy, who makes an attempt to convince Gamma to release them. After staring at the bird for a moment, Gamma changes his mind and releases both of them from captivity. This act of kindness would later have Amy try to convince Sonic and Gamma to stop fighting when Eggman pits them against each other on the deck of the egg carrier. In Gamma's story, Amy will continue to convince Gamma that he's not an evil robot, proven in the moment that he saved her, and this causes him to reflect on the horrors that he's seen while working for Eggman, deleting his master registration and vowing to search for his lost brothers and save them one by one
by destroying them.
Yes, this is a story of betrayal and assassination, depending on which side of the story you're looking at. But we'll break down his definition of saving them in a second. I want to show some concept art first. And there isn't much information on the background for the design of Gamma, but there are multiple concepts of what this robot was supposed to look like. A majority of these designs would look a lot like the Egg Robos from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, with much smaller bodies, but the eyes would remain more or less the same throughout development. I love that this one actually looks like it was going to be a mini AT-AT from Star Wars, or is it pronounced AT-AT? Star Wars fans, check me on that. So Gamma's final design would be used to create the E100 series, which in this particular game consists of Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, and Zeta, who are more or less identical and only color swapped at first. There's also Zero, the Rastafarian robot who is stalking Amy and the bird throughout their whole story and Sonic adventure, who is dubbed as more of a prototype to the E-series, hence his name. It's implied that the E100 series are more specialized units for hunting and assassination, and in comparison to all the robots we've seen from Eggman at this moment in time, maybe except for Metal and Mega Sonic, they're leagues more intelligent with the capability of speech, except for Beta. Each unit has a particular flicky inside them, so while I'm on the topic, these things actually predate the Sonic franchise by 7 years. First introduced in an arcade game known as Flicky, released in 1984. And yeah, this is Sega's attempt at biting off of that other arcade game Mappy that was doing very well at the time by Namco, which makes me believe that Sega reached a lot of success by copying other people, but you know, hey, that's neither here nor there. We're not having that conversation today. So in this Flicky game, you'd control a small blue bird that would collect chicks. No, not those chicks. These chicks. And these chicks were wandering around the level, so as you collect them, you would return them to a doorway which would lead to the next level once you've collected all of them. So this character would be repurposed for the Sonic series alongside other small animals that would be used to power Eggman's robots. And you're probably also used to them bursting out of the capsules at the end of the levels of various Sonic games. Alright, so let's get back to Gamma, and the moment he announced his free will. He decides at that moment he's going to save the rest of the E100 series robots, and goes to track them down in various levels, destroying them one by one to save the Flicky inside. See, this confused me as a kid because this isn't exactly my idea of saving them until you think on it a little bit more. Is it the Flicky inside Gamma that is driving it to destroy these robots and release his actual Flicky friends inside? Or is this the will of the robot Gamma destroying the other robots to release them from this life of servitude to Eggman? Or is it a combination of both? So this isn't explicitly explained in the game, so I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. So Gamma proceeds to take on the remodeled versions of Delta, Epsilon, and Zeta. And Zeta looks ridiculous, by the way, at least the others are capable of moving. But once you've successfully assassinated all your younger brothers, I'm sure YouTube demonetized me for that one, Gamma goes back to the deck of the egg carrier for one last roll call with one of the most well-delivered lines in his story.
Units remaining. Gamma.
This gives me straight chills. So now we have to fight Beta in his new badass form, E101 Mark II, with one of my favorite tracks blaring in the background. This is really an awesome boss battle. I have nothing else to say about it. And at the end of the fight, Gamma is victorious, but with his last few moments, Beta blasts Gamma point blank, causing fatal damage. And Gamma can only process his last few moments and gazes upon the flicky that was inside Beta. At the last second, Gamma remembers his family, the gray flicky that's inside Beta, and the blue bird that was around Amy when he released her from Eggman's prison. With Gamma destroyed, the pink flicky is released and reunited with the gray one that was within Beta, and eventually at the end of Amy's story, they are both united with the blue flicky as well. So it's not explicitly stated in the English version of the game, but I always thought that the flicky inside Beta and Gamma were the parents of the blue one that was hanging around Amy, since she refers to them as his family. So imagine my confusion when the Sonic the Hedgehog Encyclopedia refers to the gray and pink flicky as his parents, only to later contradict this in the same book and say they're his older brothers. So just to clear this up, in the Japanese version of Sonic Adventure, they are explicitly referred to as siblings. So with that in mind, it's cool to theorize that Birdie here probably was meant to be placed inside E103 Delta, who would have been the next in line but got away while Eggman was capturing them. Delta is a darker shade of blue, Gamma is a darker shade of red that matches the pink flicky, and Beta is colored black with his flicky being gray. So probably not intentional, but maybe they thought about this when they gave Delta his color, who knows. Anyway, we wouldn't see much of Gamma after his destruction, though the pink flicky is included in the final chapter of Sonic Adventure, hanging alongside Amy before Sonic transforms into Super Sonic to take down Chaos. In Sonic Adventure 2, we would see new robots known as E1000s that are more or less based on Gamma's model, but they are definitely less intelligent and are pretty simple enemies to take down. I imagine that Eggman just built these in Gamma's likeness because he liked Gamma so much, who knows. The closest we'd get to Gamma returning in an actual storyline was in Sonic Battle, where a machine called Chaos Gamma is created by Eggman. It's actually stated by Rouge the Bat that Chaos Gamma was constructed by Eggman using the Chaos Emeralds on robot cores as power sources. So it's heavily implied he may have used the remains of Gamma to construct this new version. A more subtle appearance of Gamma in the games can be found with E123 Omega, who serves as the last member of the E100 series. He debuts in Sonic Heroes, and I'll more than likely be covering more of Omega's origins at a later date, but there are some theories that Gamma's parts could have been used to build him as well, thus resulting in his rebellious nature against Eggman, which I'd love to see confirmed at some point since he's the perfect character to carry on the mantle that Gamma left behind. Although he's destroyed, we've seen many cameos with Gamma across the franchise, with him recently being released as a playable character in the mobile game Sonic Forces Speed Battle, just in time for this Origins video. But seriously, I didn't plan that, I'm just a prophet. And then of course, there's the other source of media I want to talk about, the Archie comics, yay! So a lot of the events in the Archie comic mirror the games with some minor differences. Gamma is created along with the other units of the E100 series using flickies to power them. The robots compete with each other to track down Froggy, but Gamma is victorious much like the games, but he knocks out Big the Cat in Cat Country to capture Froggy from him, so I thought that was a funny little detail. And as you all know, Eggman decides to dispose of the other E100 series who didn't return the frog. So while the scene with Amy and the blue flicky still occurs with Gamma releasing both of them from captivity, the major difference here is that the flicky within Gamma is identified as the parent to the blue one, probably intentionally done to confuse the fuck out of all of us even further. To add insult to injury, she was supposed to be pink, but was colored brown because the colorist missed a note from Ian Flynn. Womp. So screw the Chaos Emeralds, rings, special zones, humans in Sonic games. These birds are the least consistent part of the Sonic series, bar none. Sometimes they're female, sometimes they're male, other times they're a trio of siblings, other times they're parents and children. You could call these birds anything that you want. Apparently this bird is called Lily in Sonic X, but it's called Birdie in Sonic Adventure. Who do I believe with these birds? I'm about to lose my mind figuring out how these birds, what are they supposed to do? What is life? Why do they keep changing? Is my next Origin Oracle gonna be on these birds? I'm so sorry about that, let's move on. Anyway, Gamma would gain free will and go completely rogue in the comics, destroying every E100 series robot, like in Sonic Adventure, but he would actually live to see another day and would travel the world fighting against Eggman as a lone soldier. I really love this idea, and though it would kind of ruin his story in Sonic Adventure, him surviving the final battle with Beta works in the comic book setting. Gamma would continue to fight against Eggman for the next year before meeting Shadow the Hedgehog, who would attempt to enlist him as an asset to the Guardian units of the nation.
Gee, you went seriously.
Gun, yeah.
Gamma actually agrees to this proposal and is interested in assisting Shadow and Gun before they're ambushed by E-123 Omega, who was sent by Eggman to destroy Gamma once and for all. Gamma, who was beginning to wear down prior to the battle, still attempts to take on Omega, but is outdated in comparison and is overpowered by the massive robot. Gamma eventually surrenders but tells Omega that his soul is indestructible and would continue to linger inside of him. In his last moments, Gamma manages to upload his algorithm for free will into Omega's programming as Omega destroys him. And the Flicky inside is finally released, and as Gamma said, his soul lives on within Omega, who discovers his free will and chooses to join Shadow and Gun in the fight against the Eggman Empire in place of Gamma. So long live E-102 Gamma, one of Eggman's greatest creations. I honestly love this character, even down to his smooth as butter voice in Sonic Adventure. Gamma lives on as the calm, collected, and compassionate robot that Sonic fans see as one of the best character stories written in the series.
Those things look so sick, it makes me want to bark like a dog. See, wasn't that cool?
I've been waiting for this.
We've reached the next major character everyone has asked me about, and I know you all knew it was coming. Shadow the freaking Hedgehog.
He's only the second most popular character in the whole canon. Let me get you a chair, Mr. Shadow.
I'd argue that this Hedgehog has the most fleshed out backstory in the entire Sonic franchise, so there's definitely a lot to unpack in this video. And without further ado, let's head back in time. So as many of you know, Shadow the Hedgehog first debuted in Sonic Adventure 2, released worldwide in summer 2001 for the Sega Dreamcast. This was toward the end of the Dreamcast's life cycle, and in my opinion, this game served as Sega's last hurrah in the video game hardware market. It was also hard for me to fathom that Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, the Nintendo GameCube port of the game, came out less than a year later. Time really does move a lot slower when you're a kid. Anyway, despite their failing console, this game received a lot of hype and intense amounts of marketing, with Shadow being pushed as this evil foil to Sonic the Hedgehog. Finally, within the games, an enemy who could match Sonic's speed, and he would be Sonic's greatest threat yet. It's actually quite interesting to look at these advertisements years after the fact. Good Hedgehog. Evil, sinister, malcontent Hedgehog.
Good Hedgehog. Subject B. Evil Hedgehog. Introducing Shadow from Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah, this marketing worked though, as Shadow would become the second most popular character in the entire series, and Sonic Team truly wanted to use the dichotomy between good and evil as the major theme of Sonic Adventure 2, splitting the story up into two perspectives, Hero and Dark. The hero side featured the stories of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, while on the dark side we experienced the perspective of Shadow, Eggman, and Rouge, who was also a newly introduced character at the time. But we'll get to her next video. I always thought Dark was an interesting choice of wording as the opposite to Hero.
That black hedgehog?
Did you see it? Where is it now?
You'd assume they'd use Villain instead, but I believe this was intentionally done to avoid mislabeling Shadow and Rouge as villainous characters, despite their less than noble intentions during the course of the story. Anyway, depending on which side you choose, your introduction to Shadow may have been one of two scenarios. Chronologically, at the beginning of the Dark story, Eggman is seen blasting his way into the heart of Prison Island in search of a top-secret weapon created by his grandpapa, Dr. Gerald Robotnik, 50 years prior. The Guardian units of Nation
Gee, you went seriously.
Gun, yeah.
sealed it deep away within Prison Island, only for the Doctor to decimate their security defenses and release none other than Shadow the Hedgehog himself, the ultimate life form. Eggman would briefly mistake Shadow for Sonic trying to foil his plans, but this doesn't last very long, as Shadow offers to help the Doctor conquer the world. And to do this, they need the help of the Chaos Emeralds. So Shadow takes it upon himself to steal one, which causes the entire city to turn on Sonic in a bullshit case of mistaken identity. And this would eventually lead to Sonic fleeing the military in the iconic city escape level. Shout out to everyone who played the shit out of this demo over and over on that trial disc they packed with Phantasy Star Online. So after Sonic manages to temporarily evade the military, he stumbles upon the reason for his misfortune. And the introduction to Shadow the Hedgehog for many fans would be this moment where Sonic first encounters his evil double.
Now Now I know what's going on. The military has mistaken me for the likes of you. So, where do you think you're going with that emerald?
Seeing Shadow completely break Sonic's ankles in this one display of speed.
Alright, you ready for them juke skills? Ooh! Barry Sanders! Bro, that dude ankles is still in the other room right now.
It's in the top 10 Sonic moments somewhere. Watch Mojo, write that one down. Anyway, this moment will set the stage for the rivalry between the teams for the rest of the game, but to understand the origins of Shadow, we need to turn the clock back 50 years and head up into space. So, orbiting the Earth 50 years prior is the space colony ARC, an enormous research facility created by the government for experiments, scientific testing, and top secret research. It was here a top secret initiative known as Project Shadow would begin, a project with the purpose of creating the ultimate life form for presumably militaristic purposes. And the lead scientist brought in to work on this biological weapon was none other than Dr. Gerald Robotnik, the grandfather of Dr. Eggman. And Gerald was accompanied to the ARC by his granddaughter Maria, who suffers from a terminal illness known as neuroimmune deficiency syndrome. His love for Maria would drive Gerald to tailor his research on this weapon to attempt to find a cure to her disease as quickly as possible. So the first successful prototype of Project Shadow would be a lizard-like creature known as the Bio-Lizard. Based on a top-secret report found by Rouge within the events of the game, this prototype of Project Shadow required a type of engine to use the same chaos control abilities we see the actual Shadow utilize within the game. But further down in the same report, it said that the Bio-Lizard began to grow exponentially to the point where it got out of control and had difficulties walking. This, plus the creature having low levels of intelligence and its instability, caused a lot of failures during the testing phase. And all of this made the government uneasy and untrusting of Gerald, so they made the choice to shut the project down. Fair enough, right? They did this by simulating a fake biological accident aboard the ARC to create an excuse to seal away the prototype and kill the scientists on board, and place all the blame on the doctor, and then lined him up to be executed for his crimes. This is such overkill. The guy literally did everything you asked him to. But you know, I'm sure even worse things happen in actual history, so I can't even scrutinize this much. Anyway, while the government was planning this massacre, Gerald went on to the next stage of Project Shadow, creating a much more advanced life form in the form of the Hedgehog, birthing the Shadow that we know and love. And more on how this happened later. Being a much more intelligent being and not requiring all the life support systems that were installed on the Bio-Lizard, Project Shadow was a success, and Shadow himself would immediately befriend Maria, spending considerable amounts of time with her aboard the ARC. Before Gerald could continue his research to find a cure for Maria, the government would send Gunn aboard the ARC to bring about an unfortunate end to the project. And in a desperate attempt to save Shadow, Maria sticks him into an escape pod to be sent down to Earth before she is shot and killed by the pursuing gun soldiers, while poor Shadow here is incapable of saving her and is shot down to the world below. So after these tragic events, we assume at some point Shadow is retrieved by Gunn and sealed away deep within Prison Island, which brings us back to 50 years later to where he's released, joining Eggman's efforts to take over the world in an attempt to avenge Maria. This leads to Eggman conspiring with Rouge and Shadow to collect all the Chaos Emeralds to power the Eclipse Cannon, a giant cannon built within the space colony ARC by Gerald, which would serve as a means for the Dark Squad here to threaten the world's governments, so they would submit to Eggman. The game proceeds with Sonic and his friends chasing after Eggman and his new team to thwart their plans, which eventually leads to all 6 characters being aboard the space colony ARC with all 7 Chaos Emeralds. You guys can fill in the gaps in between, right? And despite their best efforts, Eggman manages to get all 7 emeralds into the Eclipse Cannon, but the ARC doesn't exactly do what he expects. In short, we find out that Gerald programmed the ARC to crash into Earth once all the Chaos Emeralds are gathered, to get revenge on mankind for what they did to Maria. We see in his last moments prior to being executed where he's completely lost his sanity and only wishes revenge on those who took away what he loved most.
All of you ungrateful humans who took everything away from me will feel my loss and despair.
As the ARC begins to plummet, Amy manages to convince Shadow that it's not what Maria would have wanted Shadow to do, which snaps him out of his grief, and he proceeds to help the others stop the ARC from exterminating mankind. So Sonic and Knuckles take point to use the Master Emerald in the core to stop the emeralds from moving the ARC directly into Earth's gravitational pull, while Shadow takes on the Shadow prototype Bio-Lizard to buy them time to stop the ARC. So even after their best efforts, it's too late to stop the ARC since it's already in the Earth's gravitational pull, So Sonic and Shadow use the Chaos Emeralds to go super, while the Bio-Lizard Chaos controls himself onto the Eclipse Cannon to use it as an anal probe.
What?
So Super Sonic and Super Shadow save the day and use their combined powers to move the Ark back into orbit. But Shadow exhausts his energy in the process and falls down to Earth, burning up into the atmosphere, and supposedly dies. At least, that's what some of us thought back in 2001. Until we find out Shadow lives in Sonic Heroes, and then for the next few years, Shadow's backstory would be the majority of what defines his character. Sonic Team would eventually dig up all these plot points once again to release this little spin-off title. Yeah, the early 2000s were a different time, and I'll be honest, I ate up all of this angst when this game was announced. You can even see it in some of my old AMVs if you want to go back that far down. But for some reason, Sonic Team took it upon themselves to take suggestions to give Sonic a gun, based on ideas that were mailed to them by a bunch of kids. And they believed that Sonic having a gun would have been way out of character, so why not give it over to our boy Shadow here instead? And this game would flip everything we knew about Shadow's origins on its head. But before we get into this whole total retcon dumpster fire, I want to briefly talk about Shadow's early conception. I already made a video in the past going over most of this concept art, so you should check that one out once you're done with this one. But Shadow here went through many different phases. Originally, I think based on these concepts, he was probably going to be straight up evil before they finalized the plot, but that's just my speculation. His original name was Terios, which according to some sources means reflection of, so it's pretty obvious they were searching for a name that was rather fitting as Sonic's foil. For some reason, I can't find anywhere else that defines the meaning of Terios as reflection of. Most of my Googling tells me the term is an old Greek word for making dreams come true, which, you know, seeing how Sonic Adventure 2 played out, maybe this is not that bad of a name. But Shadow's final design would be created by Shiro Maekawa, who you can thank for the Chao pet system that was implemented in Sonic Adventure 1. He'd go on to become a scenario writer for Sonic Adventure 2 and has been quoted to hold Shadow very dear to his heart, which makes me wonder how it feels to see your creation come to life on the big screen.
It was a black site, sir. Someone worked very hard to keep this hidden.
Oh my god! Oh my fucking god!
Project Shadow.
Alright, so after he burned up in the atmosphere at the end of Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Team received a lot of feedback from fans to see him return. The response was overwhelming, and not only did they bring him back for Sonic Heroes, but they moved forward to create his own game, which brings us back to the 2005 spin-off title, Shadow the Hedgehog. So story-wise, this game would bring up new revelations about Shadow's origins that weren't addressed in Sonic Adventure 2. Apparently, 50 years ago, while Gerald was trying to make breakthroughs with Project Shadow, he ran into many failures and couldn't figure things out. So he enlisted the help of an alien named Black Doom that happened to be passing nearby in space with his ancient civilization of evil alien goons. And Black Doom offers Gerald his blood to finish creating Shadow in exchange for the 7 Chaos Emeralds the next time they pull up to Earth on their floating alien comet thing that they call Black Comet.
The professor was in development of the ultimate life force, but he needed my help. So we made a deal. I helped him, and he promised to deliver me the 7 Chaos Emeralds. That's how you were created, Shadow. You would help us do both.
Black Doom tells Gerald that he needs the emeralds to power the comet to enter the Earth's atmosphere so it can drain the energy from the planet. So Gerald agrees to this and manages to finish creating Shadow using the blood provided by Black Doom. But he's not totally pleased with the idea of these aliens returning to destroy the planet. So he also creates the Eclipse Cannon in the Ark so that there's a means to destroy this comet the next time the aliens come around. I mostly leave my opinions out of these videos, but I think all of these plot changes were a little unnecessary. I think that a totally new conflict for Shadow would have been a much better choice for this game, instead of taking what we know about his past and adding crappier details to it. In my opinion, a new plot point without connections to the events on the Ark could have laid the groundwork for Shadow's purpose in future titles, but that's just me. Surprisingly, they would go on to handle this pretty well in Sonic 06, but everybody hates that game, so you know, it's kind of a moot point. But maybe I'll do a deeper dive into Shadow's story in Sonic 06 one day, because I honestly think that was the perfect character growth for him. Okay, so how different is Shadow's origins in other Sonic universes like the comic book series or the animations? Well, let's start with the Archie comic. You can kinda tell that once the adventure series started, the Archie writers took less creative liberties with the newer character backstories. Since like Tikal and Chaos, Shadow's origins remain pretty much intact. He's first introduced in Sonic the Hedgehog issue 98, and his origins on the arc are pretty much the same as in the games, with him being created by Gerald 50 years prior and developing their friendship with Maria before she's tragically killed. One major change in the course of these events is that Gerald actually has his biomatter implanted into Shadow, and if anything bad happens to him, it brainwashes Shadow to take revenge on humanity. So like its game counterpart, Shadow and Sonic would go on to defeat the final hazard and stop the Ark from crashing into the planet, causing Shadow to fall down into space. But in this series of events, he's rescued by an alien race known as the BEM, who more or less observed the Mobians with little to no interference. If you've watched my Tails origin video, these are the same aliens who saved Tails' parents from death when Robotnik takes over Mobitropolis. So once the BEM save Shadow from space, they utilize his Super Shadow energy to make an attempt to repel an evil alien civilization known as the Zorda. And despite their best efforts, this plan fails, with the Zorda shooting down Shadow to Mobius during their battle in space, where he meets with Sonic and the other freedom fighters, who join together to stop the Zorda invasion.
What is that?
And from here, Shadow is permanently cemented within the Archie plotlines as he searches for a purpose among different groups, even joining Eggman at some point when he finds out that he's Maria's relative. In all other media, Shadow would serve as the resident anti-hero, like for instance in Sonic X, which more or less fully adapts the plot of Sonic Adventure 2. It does manage to flesh out the events of the Ark a little bit, even including the recollection of events on the Ark by the gun soldier who pulled the trigger and killed Maria. I always thought this was a great episode, as it shows the soldier fully regretting his actions, with him pulling the trigger out of fear and experience when he was young, which humanizes him a little bit. So while Shadow would fall to Earth after defeating Final Hazard in the anime's plot as well, he would be recovered and rescued by Dr. Eggman. And in the final season of the show, Sonic and friends take to space to gather all the Chaos Emeralds spread across the galaxy to stop the third evil alien race I've brought up in this video, the Metarex. Shadow, on the other hand, while alive, will clash with Sonic's group a few times, losing most of his memories after his fall to Earth. And one episode in this season has Shadow befriending a young girl from another planet named Molly, who despite her age is an expert pilot who resists the Metarex that have oppressed her world for a very long time. Molly would remind Shadow a lot of Maria, and throughout the course of the episode, she does gain his respect. And after being double-crossed by other members of the Resistance who tried to kill Molly, she tries one last flight of desperation at the Metarex mothership, and despite Shadow trying his best to convince her to stop, she continues her assault and is killed in the process. This would be another turning point for Shadow, as he'll eventually assist Sonic in finally stopping the Metarex at the end of the series, in the memory of both Maria and Molly. And I think Sonic X, much like other Sonic media, used that last season to kind of figure out what Shadow would do after he's pretty much come to terms with his past. So finally there's Sonic Boom, and there's not much to really say about this universe, especially in the animation, since Sonic Boom is more or less a comedic slice of life spin-off series for the Sonic characters. In the animation, everyone seems to just be chilling on the same island, and I always like to think of it as like the retirement story for all the Sonic characters. Shadow, on the other hand, makes his first appearance in an episode where Eggman gathers together other villains to plan a plot to defeat Sonic. But there were a few games that were released alongside the cartoon series, with Shadow appearing in Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric and Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal. Though there is zero backstory given for Shadow, nor does he have much motivation to be picking fights with Sonic, but he kinda does it anyway.
Shadow, what are you doing here?
Not a great time, Shadow. I'm a little busy saving the world.
Saving the world? You? Don't make me laugh. You're weak. And you know what makes you weak? Your loyalty to your pathetic friends.
Like, this whole game was character assassination for Shadow, and strangely enough, I feel like Sega wants to take this route with Shadow being somewhat hostile to Sonic just because. I'm hoping this changes, because you can definitely have an anti-hero in a story without them being forced to pick fights with the hero all the time. But at least in Shattered Crystal, they have Shadow being mind-controlled by the main villain, Lyric, and after he's defeated by the heroes, he goes to get revenge on Lyric for this reason. So, much better execution here. Before I end this video, I have to mention Shadow's magnificent reveal at the end of the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie. With this universe carefully being fleshed out, I'm interested to see how many elements they take from Shadow's backstory within the games. All we know at the moment is that top secret records from 50 years ago regarding Project Shadow are unearthed by gun agents as they erase Dr. Eggman from their database. So will Shadow still have ties to Dr. Eggman through his grandfather Gerald, or will there be a totally different scientist responsible? Does the space colony arc exist in this universe? And will Shadow still be made from the blood of another alien race like the Black Arms from Shadow the Hedgehog? I've heard Sonic 3 is already being planned, so it looks like Jeff Fowler and the team are excited to bring us more, and I'll be here to give my thoughts when it releases in 2024. I know I'll have to do an update video on Shadow when that time comes. But don't be surprised if they take some elements from the Shadow the Hedgehog game, because Jeff Fowler, the director of the movie, actually worked on the CG movie production for the 2005 video game. Honestly, that's one of my favorite parts of the game. I think that intro is actually beautifully done.
What the fuck? Oh shit.
Rouge the Bat is a character that's shrouded in a lot of mystery, and that could be intentional on Sega's part, or just because they didn't feel like incorporating a backstory for her. I can get why it was option B, since her first appearance was in Sonic Adventure 2, where she was overshadowed mostly by Shadow the Hedgehog's introduction and backstory. But Rouge is one of the more popular Sonic characters in the franchise for reasons, but I'd argue she's one of the most intelligently written characters in the series as well. But let's start from the beginning. She's an integral part of the Sonic Adventure 2 plot, first debuting in the summer of 2001, joining Eggman and Shadow's ranks as a treasure hunter tasked to hunt down the Chaos Emeralds that would be used to prime the Eclipse Cannon in the Space Colony arc. This cannon would be a threat to the world's governments to coerce them to fully submit to Eggman and relinquish the control of the Earth to the mad scientist. A lot of context for this story can be found in my previous video on Shadow, but truly, what do we know about Rouge the Bat? Partway into the Dark Team's plot, we learn that she's actually a secret agent hired by the government to obtain information on Project Shadow, and also to keep tabs on the whereabouts and plans of Dr. Eggman during the story. And that's all well and good, but have we ever questioned that while undercover, Rouge still attempts to steal the Master Emerald, steals 3 Chaos Emeralds on Prison Island while assisting the bombing of Prison Island, eradicating most of it in the process? And I have to believe that gun soldiers died in that explosion too. And oh yeah, she's also an accomplice to Eggman, blowing up the moon with the Eclipse Cannon, probably causing catastrophic consequences worldwide. I could go on, but the more I play this game, the less I'm sold on that government spy bit. Even if she's more or less a free agent contracted by the government, you have to wonder if she's ever had criminal charges against her in the games. And yes, I know, undercover police have to get into some dirty work from time to time, but blowing up a whole island and half the moon?
Come on now, dawg.
Okay, my rant is over. But after obtaining all the necessary information on Project Shadow, Rouge is caught in the act by Shadow himself, realizing that she's the famous agent, Rouge the Bat?
Now I know who you are. You're that government spy, Rouge the Bat, aren't you?
So you did your homework, is that it?
Like, bruh, she literally introduced herself as that. Like, Sega could at least given her an agent codename or something where she's famous, but her identity is secret. But anyway, with the jig up, Rouge has a conversation with Shadow questioning his real identity, since the information on Project Shadow documents something totally different, a giant lizard experiment named BioLizard. And this all culminates into the last story arc where the cast have to band together to stop the arc from plummeting to Earth. We would see Rouge as a permanent member of the Sonic cast from this point on, appearing in Sonic Heroes to serve as that glue that brings together a revived Shadow and Eggman's defiant creation E-123 Omega, as they work together to hunt down Eggman to get answers, and in Omega's case, to shoot up the Doctor. But let's take a moment to discuss her design and conception. Surprisingly, there's not much to go on here, and I imagine that will be the case for a lot of Sonic characters going forward. While I do have some concept designs for Rouge the Bat, the only information I can get on her inclusion was that she was meant to be the rival to Knuckles, and was decided from early on that she would be a government spy, with a more mysterious backstory within the game. Her name throughout early development was Nails, which honestly would have served as a perfect codename for her agent persona while her real name remained Rouge, and I have no idea why Sonic Team didn't go that route. And while it's always cool to see concepts that Sonic Team draft up for our favorite characters, I must say that I'm always pleased with their final choices. Rouge does look more like a treasure hunter in this concept art, emphasized by the treasure sack in her hand. But I do love the femme fatale look that they went to sell the more seductive and cunning personality of the character. And let's make sure Sega never forgets that they put a dominatrix outfit for Rouge in the original Sonic Adventure 2. If y'all didn't know that, trust me, it's real. So after Sonic Heroes, Rouge would often be associated with Shadow and Omega from time to time, as they come together as the anti-hero team that work to solve their problems together. And I always thought that there would be a lot more interactions between her and Knuckles rather than Shadow, since they are more or less rivals in Sonic Adventure 2. But this has slowly fizzled out of the games with the occasional friendly, flirty banter from Rouge to get Knuckles flustered. I mean, there is Sonic Rivals 2 where they spend most of the story together, but maybe I'll cover that series some other time. Unfortunately, there's not much else to discuss regarding Rouge origin-wise within the games, but I do want to highlight her story within Sonic Battle, a small fighting game title for the Game Boy Advance that released in 2003. The story in Sonic Battle focuses a lot more on the characters, with each of the cast spending time with a powerful ancient robot that ends up being named Emerald by Sonic after he discovers him on the beach. Emerald ends up in wacky, zany, and even serious situations with each of the main characters, while he slowly grows in intelligence and power from his experience with the characters, and them giving him Chaos Emeralds because that turned out to be a great idea. I'm just kidding, it doesn't. He goes out of control and has to be put down by Sonic. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about Rouge, who would actually be the third character in the game to spend some quality time with Emerald. She somehow manipulates Sonic and Tails to allow Emerald to follow her commands, and she proceeds to train Emerald to go rob a bank. I'm not kidding, she steals this robot to train him up to rob a bank. So I need more of this Rouge in future Sonic games, because there's no justifying this. And off topic here, but a crazed Amy is chasing Rouge throughout her story because she accuses Rouge of kidnapping her and Sonic's baby, aka Emerald. And this game is wild at times, and it still goes down as one of my favorite Sonic stories. I mean, what other game out there exists where Rouge calls Sonic daddy? None.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
I think that we get the most fleshed out backstory for Rouge in the, yes, you guessed it, Archie comics. And she is solidified as starting off as a treasure hunter in her past due to her obsession with riches and rare gems. This would lead to many run-ins with two other characters I haven't brought up in ages, Fiona Fox and Nick the Weasel. And if you remember these two, Fiona Fox is the one that almost caused Sonic and Tails to kill each other because Sonic started dating her while Tails had a crush on her.
Fiona!
She comes out as a villain shortly after that, so, you know, Sonic and Tails have to brush that one off and cut the loss. Nick the Weasel is the twin sister of Knack the Weasel, aka Fang the Sniper, who is also a thief/mercenary who ends up butting heads with Sonic and the gang pretty often. I've done an entire video on Fang as well, so go check that out if you need a bit of a refresher. Anyway, with the rivalry between Rouge, Nick, and Fiona established in the past, they'd actually compete against one another in an illegal fighting arena, with Rouge taking down Fiona, Bark, and Bean, which I actually find pretty impressive. Don't underestimate Rouge's fighting prowess, that's one thing that they make clear in the games. We don't know much about her past, but in the Archie comics she's persuaded by the Guardian units of Nation to perform work for them in order to make up for her crimes, which I think is a much better foundation for such a checkered character like Rouge. She would go on to accept this offer from Gunn and becomes an agent that we're familiar with in the games as well. And much like the plot of Sonic Adventure 2, she'd ally herself with Dr. Eggman to keep tabs on him, but would also assist Sonic on the side to avoid Eggman's plans from becoming too problematic. She'd go on to be an anti-hero with her continued work as a spy, and developed a deeper friendship with Shadow as they work with Gunn together. But as you all know, the Archie comics would eventually be cancelled back in 2017, but we have the newest set of comics, the IDW publications, based mostly off the lore of the game universe. And initially Rouge is heavily featured, and while it doesn't disclose much about her past or origins, I love this version of her. In these sets of comics, she's especially cunning and operates behind the scenes during most of the story arcs, coming in very clutch at moments where she's needed most, especially when it comes to espionage, negotiation, or infiltration. And we get some good old-fashioned interactions between Knuckles and Rouge in this comic too, so I have to love that that was thrown in there as well. And finally, I want to talk about Rouge's involvement in Sonic X. If you haven't watched this show in Japanese, Rouge says some of the wildest things. That is a real line in Sonic X. Anyway, while her origins are shrouded in mystery, she is sent to the human world that Sonic and his friends are transported to at the very beginning of the series. And naturally, she decides to start stealing valuable jewels in this foreign world, which ends up with her getting caught by Gunn and arrested by a female agent known as Topaz. And much like the Archie comic, the president would agree to grant Rouge immunity for her crimes if she decides to work for Gunn to keep tabs on Eggman, who has become quite the nuisance to the government since he arrived in their world. So they turn her into a Suicide Squad agent after she agrees, with a whole ass bomb strapped to her wrist. But it's during these missions that she would develop a closer relationship with Topaz. And throughout the series, these two would work closely together, and Rouge would prove herself to the government as one of their best agents. As much as I dislike some of the human characters that were written into Sonic X, Chris Thorndike, I must say that the relationship between Topaz and Rouge is pretty awesome, as these two guarded characters gain respect for one another and truly become great friends. When Rouge is returning to her world with Sonic's friends, she presents Topaz with a ring as a goodbye gift. And if you know Rouge's personality by now, this is a sign of utmost respect and love. This causes the normally serious Topaz to burst into tears as she's watching Rouge step through the portal, which I think adds this amazing element regarding friendship that we don't really see in the games when it comes to Rouge the Bat. And while I'm on this topic, I know I said I missed the flirty banter between Rouge and Knuckles in the games, but Sonic X takes this to a whole different level. I couldn't believe this conversation was happening when I first watched this show, and honestly, I thought this was the fan translations being edgy and extra because there were a lot of fan translations guilty of that back in the day. No, she is literally asking Knuckles how he performs at night, and this goes on for quite a while. As much as I adore Rouge, I don't miss her being this forward, but it's great seeing Knuckles react to each of these statements. Anyway, my children, that is the origins of Rouge the Bat. Hopefully we see more of this character in future games and we get some more character interaction between her and the others, and maybe a little sprinkle of the past here and there. But leave a comment below regarding what you like best about our lovely treasure hunter, and go ahead and drop a like if you enjoyed this video. So I'm not sure when you all are getting this compilation, but I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you watched every single minute of it. I think it's like, what, over an hour and 10 minutes, so it's one of my longest videos yet. But if you guys enjoy these compilations, let me know in the comment section below. And I know right now we're switching off from Sonic characters entirely, so we'll see how these work in the future, depending on the series I'm working on. Anyway, I hope everyone has a great day, great weekend, whenever you're watching this. Be safe. The Prophet has spoken.